The laughter was the worst part. It sounded like scraping stones. When Silas Croft, the devil who owned Redemption Creek, presented his generous gift, Elara Vance felt the eyes of every man in town on her. They weren't just looking, they were devouring her. She was a broke widow, a failure. And her gift was a final, cruel joke. A man in chains, broken and paralyzed. He was an Apache warrior, an enemy, and now her burden. Croft meant to break her. He meant to prove she was as worthless as the property he'd just dumped on her. He didn't know he'd just given her the one weapon he couldn't beat, a mind sharper than any blade. The dust in the Arizona Territory had a taste. It was iron, grit, and the fine, pulverized memory of failure. Elara Ellie Vance knew the taste well. It coated the back of her throat as she stood on the porch of her barren ranch, watching the heat shimmer rise from the cracked earth. Her late husband, Jacob, had called this place Prospect Valley. In the 2 years since he'd been lowered into that same dry ground, Ellie had renamed it Last Rites. Jacob had been a man of big dreams and small sense. He'd left her with 2 things: a sun-baked plot of useless land and a crushing debt to the one man who truly owned the territory, Silas Croft. Croft owned the saloon, the bank, the land office, and, it often seemed, the sheriff. He was a man carved from polished mahogany, always dressed in a fine suit, even when the heat was boiling the lizards. His smile was a gold-toothed threat. That Tuesday, his buggy rolled up in a cloud of that familiar iron dust. Ellie gripped the rough wood of the porch railing. Her knuckles were white. "Mrs. Vance," Silas Croft said, stepping down. He didn't remove his hat. His voice was smooth, like whiskey poured over gravel. "A pleasure, as always." "Mr. Croft," she replied. Her voice was brittle. I need another week." "The cattle?" "The cattle," Croft interrupted, gesturing to the 3 skeletal cows huddled by the empty trough. "Look as poorly as your prospects. The note is due, has been for a month." "I just need rain," she whispered, a useless prayer. "We all need something." Croft walked onto her porch, invading her space. He was close enough for her to smell his bay rum cologne. It made her stomach turn. "You know, Elara, this whole unpleasant business could be settled. A woman like you shouldn't be out here alone. My hotel needs a new manager for the upstairs." The implication hung in the air, thick and vile. He wasn't offering a job, he was offering a cage. "I will pay my debt," Ellie said, her voice shaking but finding a core of steel. "I am not for sale." Croft's smile tightened. The charm vanished, revealing the viper underneath. "No? I find everything has a price. But fine, you wish to pay? Then pay." He snapped his fingers. "I can't. Not today." "I know," he chuckled. "Which is why I, in my generosity, have come with a solution. A trade." He walked back to his buggy, where 2 of his hired thugs, men with names like Lefty McGraw, stood by a wagon. "You see, I had a business transaction go sour. I acquired some property that turned out to be damaged goods, utterly useless to me. But I hate to see a resource go to waste." Lefty and the other man went to the back of the wagon and pulled something heavy, wrapped in a filthy canvas, and dragged it onto the ground. It landed with a dull, human sound. A man. He was Apache. His black hair was matted with blood and dirt. He was bound at the wrists, but it was unnecessary. From the waist down, his legs were turned at an unnatural angle, inert and useless. He was paralyzed, but his eyes were alive. They were black, burning coals of pure, unadulterated hatred. He stared at Croft, at Ellie, at the world that had done this to him. "The boys found him near the canyon," Croft said airily, as if discussing livestock. Seems he had a falling out with some rivals. Took a bullet to the spine. Can't walk, can't ride, can't even feed himself, I wager. He's a warrior who can't war. Croft pulled a document from his pocket. I was going to put him out of his misery. But then I thought of you, Ellie. A broke widow, all alone. You need a protector, don't you? The thugs laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. I'll tell you what, Croft said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. I'll take this item. He nudged the man's inert leg with his polished boot. And I'll mark this month's debt paid in full. You take him off my hands. A joke, you see. You get a worthless ranch. You get a worthless Indian. A perfect match. Ellie stared at the man on the ground. He was starving, dehydrated, and radiating a fury so intense it was almost a physical heat. He was a human being, treated as refuse. She saw Croft's game. This wasn't generosity. It was a deeper level of cruelty. It was a burden meant to break her back. It was a message to the whole territory. Elara Vance is so low. She's the town's dumping ground. If she refused, Croft would use it as an excuse. He'd say she was ungrateful, that she'd refused a fair offer. He'd foreclose. If she accepted, she was tying a stone to her own feet while she was already drowning. Well, Mrs. Vance, do we have a deal? Croft smiled. Ellie looked from Croft's smirking face to the burning eyes of the man on the ground. She saw the same trap, the same cage. Get him off the ground, Ellie said, her voice low. Croft's eyebrows rose. I beg your pardon. Get him. Off the ground, she repeated, louder. If he is part of the payment, he is my property, not yours to kick. Put him on the porch. Croft, surprised by her fire, merely shrugged. As you wish. Lefty, put the package where the lady says. The two men grunted, lifting the paralyzed man, who remained terrifyingly, rigidly silent, and deposited him on the porch like a sack of rotted grain. Pleasure doing business with you, Elara, Croft said, tipping his hat. He climbed into his buggy. Don't let him bite. He rode away, his laughter carrying on the dry wind. Ellie was left alone. The dust settled, leaving 3 skeletal cows, a dying ranch, and a paralyzed Apache warrior on her porch, who looked at her as if he would rather kill her than accept a drop of water from her hand. She put her hands on her hips, looking at the impossible task. The man was covered in filth. He was at least 200 pounds of dead weight. She was 5'4" and hadn't eaten a decent meal in a week. Well, she muttered to the silent, hateful man. My name is Elara Vance, and I suppose you and I are both in the same damn boat. He spat at her feet. Ellie sighed, wiping the spittle off her boot with a rag. Right. First things first. Let's get you cleaned up. This is going to be difficult. The first 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. The man was not a guest. He was a prisoner of his own body, and he treated Ellie as his jailer. His silence was an offensive weapon. It was thick, heavy, and absolute. He refused to speak. He refused to look at her. When she brought him water, he would wait until she left the room, his throat cracking, before drinking. When she brought him the thin broth she made from boiling down old bones, he would knock it from her hand. You have to eat, she'd yell, frustration making her voice sharp. Do you want to die on my porch? His eyes would flash, and she knew the answer was yes. He would rather die than be kept by her. Getting him clean was the first humiliation for them both. He was a proud man, a warrior, and he was helpless. She had to drag him, using her one good blanket as a travois, to the water trough. She had to cut away his ruined buckskins, revealing the raw, infected wound on his back where the bullet had entered. It was a miracle he was alive. She cleaned him with a rough cloth and lye soap, her actions brisk and impersonal. She was a rancher, not a nurse. She'd treated sick calves with more tenderness. But this was different. His body was tense with a coiled rage that had nowhere to go. She cleaned the entry wound, stitched it with the fine thread she used for her dresses, and bandaged it with strips from her wedding linens. He never made a sound. Not a grunt, not a wince. He just stared at the horizon, his jaw set so tight she worried his teeth would crack. She built him a pallet on the porch, where the air was cooler. She couldn't get him into the house. He was too heavy. She spent her days trying to fix the ranch, mending fences that her skeletal cattle just walked through, digging for new wells until her hands bled, and her nights collapsing in exhaustion, only to be woken by the man's muffled groans of pain in his sleep. He was a constant, looming presence, a reminder of her failure, given to her by Croft. The townsfolk knew it. When she rode in for meagre supplies, they'd snicker. "How's your ranch hand, Ellie?" the blacksmith called out. "Heard Croft gave you a pet," whispered Mrs. Gable, the preacher's wife, pulling her children away. Ellie ignored them. She bought her flour and salt, her jaw set just as tight as the warrior's. On the 15th day, the breaking point came. A dust storm had blown for 2 days, coating everything in a layer of fine silt. The last of her cows had wandered off, probably to die. The small sack of flour she'd just bought had been tipped over by the wind, the white powder scattered across the filthy porch boards. Ellie saw it, and something inside her, the last string holding her together, snapped. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sank to her knees on the porch, her hands landing in the wasted flour. She stared at it. It looked like ashes. It was all gone. Everything was gone. She sat there for a long time, the wind pulling at her hair. She was done. Croft had won. He'd break her with a bullet or a burden. It didn't matter. The result was the same. A sound broke the silence. It wasn't the wind, it was a voice, raspy, dry, and full of gravel. "Get up!" Ellie's head snapped toward the man on the pallet. He was looking at her. Not through her, but at her. "What?" she whispered. "Get up," he repeated. The English was broken, but the command was absolute. "Why?" Ellie asked, her voice hollow. "It's over, there's nothing left. He won. He wins. When you stay on knees." Ellie stared at him. The sheer, impossible stubbornness in his voice was a mirror of the last ember of fight left in her. She slowly, painfully, pushed herself to her feet, wiping the flour on her apron. "What's your name?" she asked. He watched her for a long moment. The hatred in his eyes was still there, but it was now overlaid with something else. A flicker of assessment. "Taza," he said. "Taza," she repeated. "My name is Ellie, and I am not staying on my knees." "Good." His eyes shifted away from her, toward the cracked patch of dirt where her garden had died. "Water." "There is no water," she said, exasperated. "The creek is dry, the well is dry. That's the problem." "No." Taza's eyes were fixed on a spot 50 yards away, near a stand of dead cottonwoods. "There, water." Ellie looked. There was nothing, just baked clay and rocks. "There's nothing there, Taza. I've looked. You look like white woman." He made a dismissive sound. "You look on surface. You do not see the stone, the shadow." He strained, his upper body lifting an inch off the pallet as he pointed with his chin. "Green weed. There." She followed his gaze. He was right. Tucked under a boulder, almost invisible, was a single, stubborn, deep green weed, vibrant and alive. A plant like that couldn't survive without a source. Ellie grabbed her shovel. She walked to the spot. She hesitated, feeling foolish. "Dig!" Tarza's voice cracked across the yard like a whip. Ellie plunged the shovel into the earth. The ground was hard, but not as hard as the rest of the valley. It was damp. She dug for an hour. Her hands bled. Her back screamed. Tarza watched, silent, his gaze unwavering. And then, 3 feet down, her shovel hit mud. A thick, dark, miraculous mud. She dropped to her knees, not in defeat this time, but in prayer, and clawed at the dirt with her bare hands. A small, cold puddle of water seeped up. It wasn't a river. It wasn't a well. It was a seep, a tiny, hidden spring. It was enough. She scooped the muddy water into her hands and drank, the grit and iron a sudden, sweet elixir. She looked back at Tarza. He hadn't moved, but for the first time since he'd arrived, the burning hatred in his eyes had banked. In its place was something new. Respect. "Now," he said, his voice quiet. "We work." The discovery of the spring changed the air between them. It was no longer the silence of enemies, but the quiet of collaborators. Tarza was no longer a burden. He was an anchor. He was paralyzed, yes, but he saw. Ellie had lived on this land for 3 years and had seen nothing but its cruelty. Tarza, in 2 weeks from a cot on the porch, had seen its secrets. The work was brutal. Ellie dragged Tarza's pallet from the porch to the shade of the cottonwoods near the spring so he could supervise. His new word. "The dirt is wrong," he'd say. "Take from creek. Bed. Mix. The angle is no good. Water. Runs. Downhill Chiaitina." "What does that mean?" she asked, pausing, wiping sweat from her face. "Stupid woman," he replied, without a trace of humor. Ellie threw a clod of dirt at him. He, impossibly, caught it. A shadow of a smile touched his lips before he suppressed it. "Fast. Hands. Good. Now. Dig. Channel." She spent days, guided by his sharp commands, digging a shallow irrigation trench from the seep to the small patch of land behind her house, the only plot shielded from Croft's view on the main road. In the evenings, as she cleaned his wounds and forced nutritious broth into him, he began to talk. Not about himself, but about the land. He taught her the names of the plants. He showed her which roots could be boiled for sustenance, which leaves could be crushed to make a poultice for her raw hands. One night, as the coyotes sang their thin, lonely song, she finally asked, "Who did this to you, Tarza? Was it Croft's men?" He was silent for a long time. "No." His voice was low, filled with a cold rage that was different from the hot anger she'd seen before. "It was Apache." He told her his story. He was a war leader. Not a chief, but a man respected for his strategy. A rival, Nantan, coveted his standing. Nantan wanted to make war, to raid the new settlements. Tarza argued for caution, for watching, for understanding the enemy. "He called me. Woman heart," Tarza said, staring into the darkness. "He said I was white man lover." During a council, the argument grew heated. Tarza turned his back on Nantan, a sign of dismissal. Nantan, in a fit of rage and shame, shot him in the back, a coward's move. "He left me for dead," Tarza said. "My warriors were loyal to him. He told them I was traitor. He took my wife." Ellie stopped stirring the pot. The casual, brutal fact of it hit her. This man had lost his body, his people, and his family, all in one act of betrayal. Croft's men found me in the canyon. They took me for bounty. But Croft saw I was broken. No, bounty for damaged goods. So he gave you to me, Ellie finished. A broken man for a broken woman. A joke. Yes, Taza looked at her. But the joke is on him. How? We have a trickle of water and a handful of seeds. A warrior fights with weapon he has. Taza flexed his powerful hands, the only part of him, besides his mind, that was still lethal. I have this, he pointed to his head, and I have you. You are my legs, my hands in the dirt. A new partnership was forged. Ellie realized his paralysis hadn't made him weak. It had made him focused. He could not move, so he observed. He saw the way the shadows fell, the patterns of the wind, the habits of the animals, and he saw the habits of Silas Croft. He asked her for paper. She had none. She gave him the only thing she had, the back of Jacob's old, failed ledgers. He asked for charcoal from the fire. She would work all day, digging and planting the small crop of beans and squash. At night, by candlelight, Taza would draw. At first, she thought they were just pictures, but after a week, she looked closer. It wasn't art, it was a map. It was a map of her ranch. But it was more. He'd drawn the path of the sun. He'd marked the creek. And then, he began to draw Croft's ranch, which bordered hers. He was mapping Croft's patrols. Lefty, rides 2 times a day, Taza murmured, his charcoal stick scratching. Morning, evening, he never looks left. Always. Right toward the mountain. How do you know that? I watch. I listen. All I do is watch, and I remember. Taza, the paralyzed warrior, was building an arsenal. It wasn't made of guns or arrows. It was made of knowledge. He was the strategist, and Ellie was his solitary soldier. The first green shoots of their hidden garden broke the soil. Ellie wept when she saw them. Taza merely nodded. It is not enough, he said. It is a start. Now, the real work. Croft will not let you survive. He damned the creek. He thinks you are dead. What do we do when he finds out we're not? Taza looked at his map, his eyes narrowing. He cuts our water. We will take his. Silas Croft, as Taza predicted, did not enjoy being ignored. He had given Ellie the joke to break her, to force her into his debt, and, ultimately, into his bed at the hotel. Her continued survival was an insult. One morning in early summer, Lefty McGraw rode out, not on his usual patrol, but with a crew of 4 men. Taza saw them first. They come, he said, his voice flat. Ellie's heart hammered. What do they want? To see the corpse. Ellie hid her tools and stood on the porch, trying to look as destitute as she had a month ago. Lefty rode up, his eyes scanning the property. He sneered. Mornin', widow. Croft wants to know if you're ready to sell. He's offering 10 cents on the dollar. Fair price for a graveyard. I'm not selling, Lefty. Lefty's eyes narrowed. You look better. The pet still breathing? He peered onto the porch, where Taza sat in the shadows, as still as stone. He's my business, Ellie said. Lefty grunted. Suit yourself. He turned to his men. Mr. Croft is worried about waste. That creek upriver on his land, it's springing a leak. We're just plugging it. Ellie's blood ran cold. The main creek, though dry, was what fed the water table. If he dammed it further up, you can't, she cried. That's water for the whole valley. It's Mr. Croft's land, Lefty sneered. He can do what he likes. They rode off. For 3 days, Ellie and Taza listened to the distant sound of axes and digging. On the 4th day, the tiny seep, their miracle, slowed to a muddy trickle. The new green plants in their hidden garden began to wilt. Croft was strangling them. Ellie slumped against the porch railing, defeated. "He's won, Taza. He's cut us off." Taza was silent. He was staring at his maps. He had been adding to them. He'd had Ellie describe, in minute detail, the inside of Croft's office at the bank. He'd had her pace out the distance from her land to the main road. "No," Taza said, his voice a low hum. "He makes move. Now. We make move." He pointed to a spot on the map, a place on her own land, a small, rocky ravine. "What is this? That? It's just a washout. Useless. Jacob, your husband, he was stupid." "Man, you don't have to tell me," Ellie said bitterly. "He looked for gold. He dug for water. He never looked at the rock." Taza tapped the map. "You say water runs downhill. Croft's new dam is here," he pointed. "The water is stopped. It builds up behind dam, but ground is like bowl. It must go somewhere." He traced a line from the new dam, underground, through a layer of porous rock he'd observed, leading directly to the washout ravine on her property. "He thinks he dams the river. He only moves the river to us." Ellie stared. "You mean the water is there, trapped?" "Yes, but trapped deep. We need help. We cannot dig that deep. Not with shovel. We have no money. No one will help me. They're all terrified of Croft." "Not all," Taza said. "There is one. The old man. The one with the mule." Ellie knew who he meant. Jebediah Stone, a grizzled old prospector who lived in a shack in the hills, convinced he was days away from the mother lode. He came to town once a month, traded insults with Croft, who'd tried to run him off his claim, and bought whiskey and dynamite. "Dynamite," Ellie breathed. "Go to him," Taza commanded. "Tell him, Croft, steal water. Tell him we steal it back." Ellie rode her horse, a creature as gaunt as she was, into the hills. She found Jebediah sifting rocks by a dry creek. He was old, thin as a rail, with a beard stained by tobacco and a mean look in his eye. "What do you want, widow?" he growled. Ellie, wasting no time, laid out the plan. Taza's theory, the underground water, Croft's dam. Jebediah listened, scratching his beard. "That Apache, he's smart, ain't he? Croft gave him to you, I heard, like a kick in the teeth." "He's brilliant," Ellie said, the conviction in her voice surprising herself. "But he can't walk. I can't dig that deep. We need a boom." Jebediah looked at her, his eyes crinkling. "You're asking me to set a charge on my own say-so? Against Croft?" "I'm asking you to help me get water that is rightfully mine." "Ha!" Jebediah cackled. "Rightfully? Nothing in this territory is rightful, girl. It's taken. Croft takes. You're going to take it back." He stood up, grabbing his pickaxe. "I like it. I like it a lot. Croft's been a burr in my saddle for 10 years. Let's see how he likes a little fire in the hole." For 2 days they worked. Jebediah, with his expert knowledge, found the precise spot in the ravine that Taza had mapped. He and Ellie drilled into the rock. It was back-breaking labor. Taza, dragged to the site on his travois, was the general. "More. Left. Angle. Down. You are too shallow." Jebediah, to Ellie's shock, didn't argue. He respected the Apache's earth sense. "The chief here's got a nose for it," he'd mutter. "Do not call me chief," Taza said, his voice cold. All right. Taza, then. Don't get your feathers ruffled." Finally, they set the charges. Jebediah sent Ellie to the house to protect Tarza. "This is going to be a big one." Ellie covered Tarza with her own body as the ground shook. A deafening whump echoed through the valley, followed by the clatter of falling rocks. They waited. Silence. Ellie's heart sank. Failure. Then a new sound. A gurgle. A trickle. And then a roar. She ran to the ravine. Jebediah was dancing a jig. From the blasted rock, a steady, clean, beautiful stream of water was pouring out, tumbling down the ravine and pooling at the bottom. It was more than a seep. It was a new spring. They had water. They had life. "He did it," Ellie whispered, looking back at the house, where Tarza was watching. "He actually did it." "We all did it, girl," Jebediah said, clapping her on the back. "Now you'd best hide this. Croft hears that boom. He's gonna come sniffin', and this time he won't be sending Lefty." The new spring was a godsend. But Jebediah was right. It was a secret that couldn't be kept. The sound of the blast, though muffled by the ravine, had echoed. 2 days later, Silas Croft himself rode up. This time he brought 6 men. They were not his usual thugs. They were gunfighters, men with cold eyes and holsters tied low. Ellie and Jebediah were working on a camouflaged sluice gate to divert the water to their hidden garden when the riders appeared on the ridge. "Company," Jebediah growled, spitting tobacco. "And they don't look like they're here for Sunday prayer." "Get Tarza inside," Ellie said, her voice tight with panic. "No," Tarza's voice called from the porch. "Leave me. Do not show fear. You are rancher. He is guest." Croft and his men dismounted, their boots heavy on the dry dirt. Croft's face was not smiling. It was a mask of cold fury. "I heard a sound 2 days ago. Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Sounded like an unauthorized improvement. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Croft. Must have been thunder." Croft's gaze went past her, to Jebediah. "Stone. I should have known you'd be mixed up in this. Still trying to steal what's mine?" "Just helping a neighbor, Croft," Jebediah said, leaning on his shovel. "Something you wouldn't know about." One of the gunfighters spotted the damp mud near the ravine. "Boss, over here." Croft walked to the ravine. He looked down at the new, gushing spring. He looked at the lush green garden, hidden behind the house, now thriving. He looked at the half-built irrigation channel. He put his head back and laughed. It was not a sound of humor. It was the sound of a predator admiring its prey's desperate, failed struggles. "Well, well, Elara," he said, turning back to her. "You are full of surprises, and here I thought you were just a damsel in distress." His eyes flicked to Tarza. "Or perhaps you had help." He strode onto the porch and loomed over Tarza. "The broken warrior. Still playing strategist, are we? Still whispering secrets from the earth. You Apache are all alike. You think this land talks to you." Tarza met his gaze. "It talks. You do not listen." Croft's smile vanished. He backhanded Tarza across the face. A sharp, cracking sound. Tarza's head snapped to the side, but he made no sound. He just turned his head back, a small trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth, his eyes burning. "Ellie!" Jebediah moved, but 2 guns were on him instantly. "Don't move, old man." "Stop it!" Ellie screamed, running at Croft. "Leave him alone!" Croft caught her by the wrist, his grip like a steel trap. He spun her around and pressed her against the porch post, his face close to hers. "You've been busy," he hissed. "You and your pet. You think this is a victory? You think this water, this garden, saves you? You are living on my charity, Elara, and my charity has run out." "This is my land," she spat. "The water is on my land. You can't take it." "Oh, I can't." Croft's eyes were dead. "I can. I damned the creek. I can fill this hole. I can burn your little garden. I can take your old friend Jebediah here and have him arrested for setting an illegal charge." "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I would." He released her, smoothing his waistcoat. "But I am a businessman. I am prepared to renegotiate." He walked back over to Taza. "This joke. I'm afraid it's gone on long enough. He's more trouble than he's worth. He's inciting you." "He's not your property anymore," Ellie said, rubbing her wrist. "You gave him to me. The debt was paid." "Ah, but that's where you are mistaken." Croft reached into his coat pocket and produced a folded, grimy piece of paper. He flicked it open. "I thought you might get attached, so I came prepared." Ellie read the paper. It was written in a crude hand. It was a bill of sale. It read, "I, Nantan, of the Chiricahua Apache, do sell one male, broken, named Taza, for the sum of $20 and 3 bottles of whiskey. Sold as is. Property of Silas Croft." Ellie's world tilted. You bought him? From the one who betrayed him?" "Yes." Croft smiled. Nantan was quite happy to get rid of his rival and get paid for it. "This man, Taza, isn't a prisoner of war, Ilara. He isn't a person at all. He is chattel. My chattel. Which I loaned to you." The joke suddenly had a new, horrifying layer. Croft hadn't just dumped a burden on her. He had set a steel-jawed trap. "He is not slave," Taza growled, the first sign of fear Ellie had ever seen in him. The idea of being owned by this man was a fate worse than death. "In this territory, you are what I say you are," Croft hissed, "and I say you are property, my property, just like this land is about to be." He turned back to Ellie. "So, here is the new deal. A very simple one. You have 48 hours. He laid out his terms. 1. You will sign over the deed to this ranch, free and clear. 2. You will accompany me back to town. You will take that job as manager at my hotel. 3. You will forget this spring ever existed." "And if I don't?" Ellie asked, her voice a dead whisper. Croft looked at Taza. His eyes were cold and final. "If you don't, I will take my property back, and since he is damaged, I will have him disposed of. A bullet is cheap, and I will still take this ranch, and I will still take you. But you won't be a manager. You'll just be one of the girls. Do you understand me?" It was a complete, perfect checkmate. He had her. He had her land, her body, and her friend's life. Jebediah was shaking with rage. You can't." The marshal is in Tucson," Croft said dismissively. "He won't be back for a month. By then this will all be settled. 48 hours, Ilara." He and his men mounted up. "Don't try to run. My men will be watching. You're fenced in, my dear, just like your protector." They rode off. Ellie sank to the ground. Jebediah spat, his face pale. That, I've never." Ellie looked at Taza. His face was a mask of cold, unreadable stone. He was staring at his hands. He had been a warrior, a leader, and now he was a piece of paper in a rich man's pocket. She had thought they were fighting for water. She realized they were fighting for their very lives. "What do we do?" she whispered to Jebediah. "There's no way out." Taza's head lifted. The fire in his eyes was gone. It had been replaced by something colder, something as sharp and deadly as an obsidian knife. "A warrior fights with the weapon he has," Taza said, his voice quiet and terrible. "You said that before," Ellie said, standing up. "What weapon do we have left?" Taza looked at her. "He has a paper. I have a memory. The sun began to set, painting the sky in colours of blood and bruising. The cold reality of Croft's ultimatum settled over the small ranch. Memory, Jebediah grunted, pacing the small porch. Memory ain't gonna stop a bullet, Taza. He'll be back, and he'll have the law, his law, with him. His law is a lie, Taza said. He was staring at the map of Croft's holdings he'd drawn on the back of the ledger. I know his secret, the one that gives him power. Ellie pulled her stool closer. What secret? What memory? Taza's story unspooled in the twilight. It was from before his injury, before Nantan's betrayal. 2 years ago, Taza began, the Great White Chief came, the one-armed soldier. General Crook. Ellie and Jebediah both stiffened. General George Crook was a legendary name in the Arizona Territory, a hard fighter, but known as one of the few military men who would actually listen to the Apache, even if he fought them. We met for parley, Taza said. My chief, Cochise, was ill. I spoke for my people. We met at Apache Pass. General Crook wanted peace. He offered terms. We would move to San Carlos, but we would keep our highlands for hunting. I heard about that, Jebediah said. The treaty fell apart. War started up again. That's when settlers round here got scared and sold out. Cheap. Sold. To him, Ellie breathed, looking at Taza's map of Croft's land. Yes, Taza said. The treaty did not fall apart. It was broken. He looked at Ellie, his eyes holding the full weight of his memory. General Crook spoke English. I spoke Apache. We needed translator. Crook brought a man he trusted, a man of the territory, a man who owned the bank. Silas Croft. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Croft, Ellie whispered. He mistranslated. He lied, Taza corrected, his voice a guttural snarl. To both. He told General Crook we agreed to all terms, that we would give up highlands, that we would be confined to the hot lands. He told us, Crook agreed, we could keep highlands. We smoked pipe. We thought peace was made. My God, Jebediah said. So when your people went to the highlands to hunt, Crook's soldiers saw it as betrayal. They fired. We fired back. The war began again. The settlers fled, and Croft bought their land. This land, all of it for nothing. Taza pointed to Ellie's ranch on the map. This was good land. His lie made it unsafe. He is the reason your husband got this land for cheap. He built his entire empire on a deliberate, self-serving lie. Ellie felt sick. The man hadn't just bullied his way to the top. He had created the chaos that allowed him to rise. He'd cost hundreds of lives, settler and Apache, all for acreage. How can we prove it? Ellie asked. It's your word against his. And you're an Apache. Proof, Taza said. Crook had a ledger, a military book. He wrote the terms in it. I saw it. And when the parley was done, Croft forgot to give it back. He offered to keep it safe in his bank vault as a neutral party. Crook was in a hurry. He agreed. He kept it Jebediah was incredulous. Why in God's name would he keep the evidence? Arrogance, Tarza said. He thinks no one would dare. And he is black-hearted. He likes to look at his work. It is his trophy. The safe, Ellie said, remembering Tarza's questions. He keeps it in the safe, behind the painting of the bull. Yes, Tarza confirmed. In his office, at the bank. A new, desperate, impossible plan formed. We have to get it, Ellie said. Get it, Jebediah yelped. That's his bank. It's got steel bars. He's got guards. He's also got an ego, Ellie said, her mind racing, catching Tarza's strategic fire. And tomorrow is the Founders' Day celebration, the one he hosts. The entire town will be at the saloon for his free whiskey and speech. The bank will be empty. It's still locked, Jebediah argued. But we have dynamite, Ellie countered. A small charge, just enough to pop the safe, not the whole building. It's madness, Jebediah said. But his eyes were gleaming. He loved the audacity. It is not madness, Tarza said. It is war with the weapon we have. He looked at Ellie. You are my legs. Now you are my hands. The plan was simple and terrible. Jebediah would create a diversion. At 8 p.m., when Croft was at his most bombastic, Jebediah would set off a small charge near his own claim, on the other side of town, and ride in screaming he'd struck the motherlode. It would pull half the drunken town, including any guards, out of the saloon. In that window, Ellie, who was small and quiet, would slip into the alley behind the bank. She'd use the window Jacob had broken and Croft had lazily repaired. She would go to the office, set a tiny, precise charge on the safe, as Jebediah had shown her. She would retrieve the ledger and Tarza's bill of sale. You must get both, Tarza insisted. The ledger saves the territory. The bill saves me. Ellie looked at the two men, the old grizzled prospector and the paralyzed, brilliant warrior. Her army. Let's go to war, she said. The next night, Redemption Creek was ablaze with light. Music tinkled from the saloon. Ellie, her heart a cold stone in her chest, slipped through the shadows, a small satchel in her hand. She left Tarza at the ranch, his pistol in his lap, watching the road. She reached the alley. As if on cue, a distant boom echoed from the hills, followed by yelling. Gold! Jebediah's voice cracked through the town. I struck it! I struck the motherlode! The saloon doors burst open. Men poured out, grabbing lanterns, heading for the hills. The bank's single guard, caught in the fever, sprinted after them. Now. Ellie jammed her pry bar into the window. It splintered and opened. She slipped inside. The bank was dark, smelling of cigar smoke and money. She found Croft's office. The painting of the bull. She pulled it aside. The safe. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the dynamite cap. She packed the mud around the hinge, just as Jebediah had taught her. She lit the short fuse and ran, diving behind Croft's massive desk. The pop was muffled, but sharp. Smoke filled the room. She ran to the safe. The door was bent, sprung from its hinges. She pulled it open. Inside, stacks of money, deeds, and a single, leather-bound book with U.S. Army stamped on the cover. Her hands closed around it. Then she frantically searched for the other paper. It was there, tucked in a separate drawer. Bill of sale. 1-1 mail, broken. She grabbed both, shoved them into her satchel, and scrambled back out the window. She ran, not for the ranch, but for the one place Croft couldn't touch, the new territorial marshal's office. Jebediah's diversion wasn't just to pull the guards. It was to cover the real news Tarza had learned. A new marshal, Elias Thorne was in town, sent from Tucson to investigate rumors of unrest. He'd been at the hotel, and Taza had insisted this was the man they had to reach. Ellie burst through the door, nearly colliding with a tall man in a clean duster who was looking out the window at the gold rush chaos. "Ma'am?" he said, surprised. "Marshal Thorne?" Ellie panted, holding out the smoking satchel. "My name is Elara Vance, and I think I have the evidence you've been looking for." Silas Croft was furious. The gold strike had been a bust, a false alarm from that lunatic Jebediah. It had ruined his speech. He rode back to the saloon, only to find his bank guard pale-faced. "Mr. Croft, the window, the safe." Croft didn't wait. He stormed into his office. The smoke, the broken safe, the missing ledger. He knew instantly. "Elara!" he roared. He gathered his gunfighters. "She's at the ranch. She thinks she's clever. She's just signed her own death warrant. And her pets." They rode hard, a posse of 10 armed men, arriving at Last Right's ranch in a cloud of vengeful dust. They found the ranch lit by a dozen lanterns. It was not, however, deserted. On the porch sat Elara Vance, holding her shotgun. Beside her sat Jebediah Stone, his rifle across his lap. In the center sat Taza, on his pallet, and standing beside them, his badge gleaming in the lantern light, was Territorial Marshal Elias Thorne. Croft pulled his horse up short. His eyes, for the first time, showed a flicker of uncertainty. "Marshal, I didn't realize you were in town. This is a private matter." "Seems to have become a public one, Mr. Croft," Thorne said, his voice a calm, deep baritone. "Mrs. Vance has made some serious accusations." "She's a hysterical widow," Croft sneered, recovering his arrogance. "A thief. She broke into my bank." "She did," Thorne agreed, "and I'll be lodging a formal complaint about your bank's security with the territorial government, especially when it's being used to store this." Thorne held up the U.S. Army ledger. Croft's blood ran cold. "That is private property." "It's government property, Mr. Croft. Stolen government property." Thorne opened the book. "A record of a parley with the Apache, at which you were the translator. Funny thing, I've been investigating the renewal of hostilities for 6 months. General Crook himself sent me. He always felt something was off about that meeting." "That's a lie. It's her word against mine," Croft yelled. "No," a new voice said. "Taza." He was not looking at Croft. He was looking at Marshal Thorne. His voice was no longer broken, but clear and strong, resonating with an authority that stunned everyone into silence. "It is not her word, Marshal. It is mine." Taza, the broken pet, began to speak. He did not speak in the halting English he used with Ellie. He spoke in flawless, formal Spanish, the language of diplomacy in the territory, which he knew Thorne would understand. He did not accuse. He dictated. "On the 4th day of May, 1873, Taza said, his voice ringing in the night air, General George Crook offered terms. He said the people could keep the highlands for hunting. He said the reservation at San Carlos would be for farming, not a prison." He recounted the entire meeting, verbatim, the terms, the promises, the names of the officers present. "Silas Croft," Taza continued, his voice dropping, "told General Crook we agreed to all terms of confinement. He told us the General agreed to all our terms of freedom. He used 2 tongues to speak 1 lie. He set the fire, then brought the ashes." The gunfighters behind Croft were shifting nervously. This was no longer a dispute over a ranch. This was treason. "This is ridiculous," Croft blustered. "You're taking the word of a savage, a slave." In his rage, he made his final, fatal error. "I have a bill of sale for him. He's my property. He has no right to speak. A bill of sale. Marshal Thorne's eyes went cold. Slavery has been illegal in this nation for over a decade, Mr. Croft, but kidnapping and human trafficking, that's still very much a crime. He held up the second piece of paper Ellie had retrieved. This bill of sale isn't a legal document. It's a confession. Croft saw the trap close. He had nothing left. His power, built on lies and intimidation, had evaporated against the truth. He did the only thing a cornered rat can do. He drew his pistol. "To hell with all of you!" he screamed, leveling the gun not at the marshal, but at Taza. He never fired. 2 shots rang out as one. One from Jebediah's rifle, taking the hat off the nearest gunfighter. The other from Ilara Vance's shotgun. The blast hit Croft square in the chest, lifting him off his saddle and throwing him into the dust he loved so much. Silence. The remaining gunfighters, their leader dead, wanted no part of a fight with a territorial marshal. They raised their hands. "It's over," Thorne said, holstering his own weapon. He looked at Ellie, then at Taza. "It's all over." The territory changed after that. The arrest of Croft's men and the revelation in the ledger sent a shockwave all the way to Washington. The treaties were renegotiated, this time with honest interpreters. General Crook himself rode to Redemption Creek, not with a cavalry column, but with a single aide. He dismounted at Ellie's ranch, which was now, improbably, green. He walked onto the porch and stood before Taza. He did not offer a hand. He knew the man couldn't take it. Instead, he gave a formal military salute. "Mr. Taza," Crook said, his voice full of a gravelly respect, "your memory has saved this territory more bloodshed than my armies ever could. The United States is in your debt." Taza simply nodded. "We are even." Croft's joke had backfired in the most spectacular way. Ilara Vance, the broke widow, was now one of the most successful ranchers in the valley. The spring Taza had found, combined with the new, peaceful irrigation, had turned her last rights ranch into a thriving oasis. She supplied the fort, the town, and the new settlers. And Taza was no longer the paralyzed warrior. He was the sage of Redemption Creek. Ellie had built him a study in the new, expanded ranch house. It had a desk he could wheel his chair under, a custom chair ordered from San Francisco. He was, officially, her business partner. But he was more. He was the most respected man in the territory. Settlers, miners, and even soldiers came to him for advice. He was the strategist, the negotiator, the planner. He had never regained the use of his legs, but he didn't need to. His mind, once his second-best weapon, was now legendary. Ellie would often sit with him on the porch in the evenings, looking out at their green valley. She was no longer a victim, and he was no longer a burden. "He meant to give me a worthless Indian," Ellie said one evening, sipping her coffee. Taza looked at her, the old fire in his eyes now a warm, steady glow. He did not know he was. Also, giving you a map-maker, a strategist, and a partner. Ilara Vance, the broke widow, had been given a broken man as a cruel joke, and together they had broken the tyrant who ruled them. Taza, the man who couldn't move, had become the man who moved the entire territory toward peace. He was no longer a pet or a joke. He was the pride of the territory. And that's the story of Taza and Ilara Vance. It's a reminder that the world will always try to tell you what you're worth. It'll call you broke, or broken, or worthless. People will try to turn your life into a joke, a burden meant to make you fail. But just like Taza, the strength you have isn't always in your fists or your legs. It's in your mind. It's in your memory. It's in your will to see what others can't. And just like Ellie, true resilience is finding a partner in the most unexpected place and having the courage to fight back. The world's joke might just be your greatest weapon. If you were inspired by Tarza's incredible strategy and Ellie's unbreakable spirit, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more tales of drama, karma, and incredible twists. Thank you for listening.